there's this tetrahedral fractal geometry, which is like the building blocks of the entire universe. Worlds are created on it. It's the secret of the universe, and that being as such, and quartz being of a tetrahedral hexagonal nature, water being of a tetrahedral hexagonal nature, has this ability to resonate, just like the Russians did experiments with quartz where all the frequencies of light in the higher spectrum can go through quartz, but they can't go through glass because it's an amorphous. The molecules are, just fused together and it's clear, but it's not the same as the molecular structure of quartz, which allows all the frequencies of light. And just like water allows all the geometries of nature to form. And so when you have this universal resonant ability, it has this ability to be resonant on multiple densities at the same time, like the arc that Elena, experienced, that the craft can be physical on multiple densities.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dan Willis and Elena Danaan to share their collaboration and insights into crystal and crystal technology with their respective backgrounds. Dan has worked with a top IBM scientist, Dr. Vogel, and Elena has worked with a Pleiadian scientist, Danaan. So welcome, Dan and Elena.
Thank you, Michael.
It's a pleasure, Michael.
Well, Dan, let's begin with you, because you began working in the early 1980s with this IBM senior scientist, Dr. Marcel Vogel, who has over 140 patents, and that includes things like liquid crystal systems such as TV computers. So how did you get involved with the work of Dr. Vogel on crystals?
Well, it started back in 1977. I was with a person who was trained at going back with hypnosis and doing a regression on me, and it didn't turn out that way. I had millions of volts going through my hands and my feet. It felt as though my energy level was what's it's commonly called a Kundalini opening experience. I have a little graphic I can share real quick. Let's see. Oh, yeah, it's disabled. Okay. Anyway, the graphic is an ET being with a rather large head, and he's projecting in space a sphere. And as I'm observing the sphere, a geometry starts to form into it. Now, keep in mind, I had no idea about sacred geometry or platonic solids or how platonic solids nest into each other. This is all totally new to me. And so what the being was conveying was that through love, we transcend from one geometry density to the next, and that when you're at a higher density, you can become aware of the lower densities, but the lower densities cannot become aware of the higher densities, and that we're all connected together in a matrix. As I observed the sphere, one geometry went into the next, another geometry into that one, and it went into infinity, and then it turned back into a sphere. And it left a burning desire in me to try to understand everything I could about this, what was being conveyed was something about the knowledge of the matrix. And so I knew that quartz crystals held a key to understanding what this knowledge was about, and as I grabbed every book I could after that experience. And, I was like blown away. It's like, my God, this is it. The geometry is going into each other and everything, which is kind of common knowledge to most high school kids that, study geometry and things. But it was like completely new to me, and it held some kind of key to understanding the matrix. So I drove up in the middle of a storm from San Diego to San Jose, and knocked on Dr. Vogel's door after, giving him a call, and had me sit down on this couch with this doctor and turned off the lights for about half an hour and played classical music. And the first thing he ever said to me was, "You're from another planet, aren't you?" I thought was kind of unusual. And I said, "I'm fascinated about your work. I got to find out, about what you're doing, cutting with crystals and everything." And a knock came on the door, and a woman heard about he was working with these medical doctors, and her daughter had this big tumor on her ankle. And as I watched on the couch with the doctor, Marcel did his procedure of using the breath and the crystal and a certain procedure that he used. And in front of us, before our eyes, we saw the tumor actually dematerialize. And that left a lasting impression with me. I drove to the mines in Arkansas. I got the first batch of crystals for all the doctors. I was working at the Naval Electronic Engineering Center, and I was able to procure a lot of the laboratory equipment. He was still working at IBM when I first met with him. And he has quantified, and his research substantiates everything that the Jenhan Iredion has shared with Elena and I.
Well, maybe this is a good opportunity to get Elena to maybe say a little bit about Jenhan Iredion. And by the way, I'd have enabled screen sharing in case either one of you want to show something.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Elena, why don't you tell us about Jenhan, how you met him and what he does regarding
This is
crystals.
the graphic real quick that I tried to put together with Photoshop to try to simulate it, and then it turns back into a sphere.
Perfect.
Well, Michael, I have a commentary to make about what Dan just shown. At the moment when Dan showed me this graphic and this extraterrestrial being, I recognized straight away an emerther, and the emerther are part of the Galactic Federation, and they are helping a lot of people to understand sciences. And the emerthers were involved in the meetings with Eisenhower as well. So I recognized the being, so I thought that was interesting to mention. So Jenhan is Thorhan, younger brother. Thorhan is my contact in the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Thorhan, for those who don't know, rescued me from an abduction by Grace when I was a kid. Jenhan I met him last year. I described my encounter with him in my book, We Will Never Let You Down. I have a portrait of him. He is a student in terraforming. So they don't say terraforming, they say star making. So he's a star maker, translated. Jenhan is a young Pleiadian. He's an Ahel from planet Hera in the Taygeta system, Ashara system. He has just recently started studying terraforming, but he's already, their mind has a superior capacity of learning and comprehension than we do at that stage in our evolution on Earth. He's studying terraforming, and sometimes he goes into field work in the Pleiades, which is a fantastic ground for terraforming because it's a young star cluster. There's all the elements within this cluster to play around and study how stars are born. So that's how I met Jenhan, and that's who he is. And when I started working with Dan, you know, playing around with crystals and starting to talk about it, let's do something about it. I went, well, let's try to ask Thorhan, younger brother, because he knows a little bit into modifying the matrix, the universal matrix, the hologram of reality. He knows all these things. And that's how the adventure started.
Now, I know you did an interview together back in June that really is a wonderful introduction to this similarity between this Pleiadian scientist and this Earth scientist, Dr. Marcel Vogel. And it really is highly recommended. People have a look at that. Just, you know, the visuals are quite stunning. And it does kind of show that even though they are very different scientists, I mean, one is an Earth scientist, one is a Pleiadian, their conclusions were very, very similar, which was uncanny. And I guess it's kind of corroboration too for your the accuracy of your information, Elena, that Dr. Vogel's information kind of like corroborated what you were being told by Jenhan.
Yes, Michael, I was not surprised, but very excited to see the result, because Dan, of course, didn't tell me all the details of his time spent working with Dr. Marcel Vogel. I knew the general lines, you know, Michael. So Dan came up with a list of questions that I was to ask to Jenhan. And so Jenhan, there was a remote connection using Thorhan, the older brother, because I am in telepathic contact with Thorhan, contact that is secured and facilitated by a device that I have in me, an implant. So via this implant, telepathically communicating with Thorhan was relaying the communication. Well, he was in contact with Jenhan, who was in the Pleiades. So I was talking to Thorhan, and he was passing on the questions to him, and he was then getting the answers and passing the answers to me. And I could hear Jenhan in responding in Thorhan's head. So I could hear the intonation and the voice of Jenhan, and Thorhan was just broadcasting back to me. It was very interesting. So I got all the answers, the question answered, and it was very quickly. I just typed it as I was hearing it, and I sent the file, I correct some typos, and I sent the file, the Word file, to Dan Willis, who was waiting, you know. Oh my God. And I didn't hear about Dan for like 2 hours. And then Dan sent me an email and he said, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. This is matching not only what Marcel Vogel found, but it goes a step further. So that was, Dan, you can maybe better talk about it than me.
Totally. It expanded upon the laboratory research work that the thing is, you had a scientist of this caliber that he was kind of going against the grain of the normal academia, like you did, Michael. And you know, so he didn't really get his peer approval going into these areas of crystals, water, love, and the interaction of all this, and what Jenhan shared. What Marcel, you know, just a brief story, you know, because this can get into a long story. How Marcel got involved in this was he had to give a course for creativity to the engineers. A lot of the engineers are very left brain and not very creative. And so we saw the work of Cleve Baxter, the polygraph expert, doing plant communication, and he thought immediately, this is garbage, and he crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. And he thought, no, this would be a good thing for the engineers to have them all do this. So they set up a Wheatstone bridge with a script chart recorder with a split leaf philodendron. And he went to burn the leaf on the plant, and the plant squiggled. And the moment the thought formed in his mind to burn the leaf again, chart squiggled. He said that squiggle changed his life. He had the kind of mind, when he was 7 years old, he set up a laboratory with the help of his father to try to find out how fireflies glowed. And he made his own synthesis of luminescent formula, how to do this. This is the kind of mind he was. And so once a question came into his mind, he would be relentless in trying to find the answer. And so he was talking at a Church of Religious Science, talking about plant communication, and a woman gave him a crystal, and he thought, oh, this is woo-woo stuff. It turns out he was working with the plants, and he was studying pranayama yoga with the breath, where he discovered, and Danaan completely substantiated, that when he pulsed his breath, he got a far greater response than just a long pulse. And so a colleague at IBM had a back problem. He took the crystal and he pulsed it like he did with the plant, and it cured his back problem. And so he was trying to find out how to make this more of a scientific tool, how to be able to more effectively cohere the energies of mind. And just like how he discovered how to create a magnetic coating for the hard drives for IBM, this formula came to him in a dream. It came to him in a dream, the tree of life, or a, let's see, show here what the form looked like. Here we go. Okay, let's share a screen real quick, show a graphic. Okay, so this is what he saw. He saw in his dream, he saw this image. And so he cut the crystal in a dipyramidal form. And he started out with a four-sided crystal. This one he cut as a gift to me for helping him with the lab equipment and getting the crystals. Then he went on to like 6-sided crystals, 8-sided, 16, and so forth. And what is amazing about the information from Danaan is that in this dream, one end of the crystal he cut to a 52-degree angle, which is the same angle that's in the Great Pyramid and related to the golden mean ratio. The other angle was near a 60-degree angle. And now we find out that the Pleiadians use this exact angle. Only at 52 is a rough angle. It's actually 51.843 degrees. And the other end is exactly 60 degrees. And what Marcel was, he had no way of knowing, but what this creates is due to the angles of inclination on both sides. Let me bring up one more graphic here. The graphic is much easier than trying to explain it. And Elena drew this, and what you have is two angles of inclination. You have a 60-degree angle and a 52-degree angle. This acts as a transponder in the matrix, and this is a sender angle. And these two angles cause two counter-rotational vortices that meet together at this phase conjunction point that open the singularity. It actually creates a wormhole. And Danaan was describing that where these two angles meet is the approximate location of where this vortex singularity occurs. Marcel had no idea about this. And it's the piezoelectric response of a crystal. A crystal normally grows in a hexagonal form. And if you cut the lattice in alignment with the natural axis, when you apply either an electrical signal or physical pressure to the lattice structure, this opens up the singularity opens up this wormhole within the crystal, which is extremely powerful. In fact, one of the questions I asked, through Elena, was about this portal gate that's between the opposites. And Jenhan said, well, this is one of the things on the list of the prime directive that we're can't normally talk about here. So he was kind of concerned. So there was like a long pause, and he checked with Thorhan, and Thorhan confirmed that it's okay, you can share this information. And he went on to share us in detail the information. It's extremely powerful, because when your consciousness can connect to the singularity, it connects to all points in the matrix, and you can imprint into the positive timeline, into the planetary matrix, a vision of a positive timeline, because this is what Elena and I wanted to do something for the good of all beings on our planet here, to move us into what you call, Michael, a Star Trek future. Just to help accelerate it along a bit, is that we have this incredible power within us, and the crystals are of themselves, they're connected with consciousness. It augments our consciousness, and it can be great power. Without a crystal, it's scientifically known that the square root of 1% of a population on the planet, which is close to about 8 billion people, is less than 9,000 people. And Elena's got over 100,000 subscribers to her channel. So at the time, we had about 1,700 live, all participating at the same time, where we, as you saw on the video, which by the way, the video was shown on the Planet Era. It had to be converted into a holographic form so that Jenhan could watch it. And he said, "Oh, my words were transcribed correctly, and I believe it was effective what you did." So when everybody used their crystal, or if they didn't have crystal, a glass of water, because they both resonate close to source and can impinge into the holographic matrix. There was reported a spike on the Schumann resonance when we did that. Anyway,
well, I wanted to just kind of, just take you up on a couple of the points that you raised. And I think it's very interesting. You were talking about the Star Trek future and the crystals, because, the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek series actually had crystals playing a very prominent role in the propulsion system. And of course, they're constantly talking about the dilithium crystal running out and needing to be replaced. So, and I've discussed in the Secret Space Program series that Gene Roddenberry was read in to the Navy's collaboration with the Nordics, or what we know now as the Galactic Federation of Worlds. So back in the 1960s, when Gene Roddenberry was coming up with the Star Trek model, working with Leslie Stevens, the creator of the Outer Limits series, he must have been told about crystals and how they are an essential part of the propulsion systems and other systems within these Nordic extraterrestrial races. Maybe Elena, do you want to kind of comment about some of these concepts that Dan mentioned, especially explain to people, what the piezoelectric effect means, what the compression node is, and of course this Star Trek connection to crystals?
Yes, Michael. So as Jenhan explained to me, the crystals have a frequency rate that is equal to water and to love, and these frequencies are the highest. And a crystal, in fact, is a bridge. And when he said that, I tilted. The Intergalactic Confederation, UNA, told me that crystals, they're inside of their ships, and it works for the arcs, Michael. It's filled with crystals, and the crystals are bridges between densities, especially quartz. Others, but quartz is the most attuned to bridge between density. But crystals bridge even through other things. For instance, it can bridge the thought that we manifest into the holographic structure of the universe, reality. So as he explained to me, and that comes into his terraforming activities, the universe is a geometrical holographic structure, and it's like a grid at the scale of the universe, and between all the elements of creation, there's a void where there is an interaction, and the distance will create the formula that will determine what the atoms together form as life, or whatever, rock, planet, life form. If you modify, if you alter, you impact the link in between the elements, the atoms or the particles, it will change or reorganize them into something else. It works for matter, life forms, consciousness, and time. So the mind has the power to manifest an impulse, an electrical impulse. That's a thought. A thought is an electrical impulse that carries an information, and information can be a manifestation, like a template, a new template, to imprint onto something, onto the grid of reality. It can, for instance, you look at an apple and you send the thought it's an orange. If you can hold your crystal and bridge it, and maybe you can probably, if you're skilled enough, you can reorganize the apple into an orange. That was called magic in the ancient times, but it's science. Then that's what we worked with Anne, to imprint a thought form of a positive timeline, a positive future, onto the grid of the actual reality, and that's what we did. So I don't know if you have other questions.
Okay, so the crystals can be influenced by our thoughts, by the feelings of love, and of course pressure. I mean, we know the piezoelectric effect that's been scientifically measured, that you put pressure on a crystal and it will generate energy. And both of you have talked about a pressure node of a crystal, and how if the pressure is precisely calibrated with that compression node, then this can maximize the amount of energy that's generated, and then kind of open these doorways, or the singularity point, as you were saying. Is that, Dan, is that kind of like how you understand it? Do you want to clarify that?
Well, it's interesting that the higher density beings are more connected with love. And as love is it is the vehicle that allows thought to transfer into the higher densities without dissonance, because Danaan said dissonance cannot resonate with an ordered state of geometrical resonance, because the matrix that we're in is all based on tetrahedral fractal geometry, and that which is closest to source, the purest, Jen had said, the purest material in the universe is quartz, and it's based on the same fractal geometry that water is. So they both act as dimensional density bridges, and love is of that same. So love, quartz, water, they're all the same fractal formula, so they all resonate with each other. So when you take a You can have a little crystal like this, and you pulse your breath. And Marcel, it's like blowing your nose, and Jen Han would say you have to be like a burst. It's almost like in martial arts. You do these bursts of energies, like that, almost like you're blowing your nose. But you do it in conjunction with the thought that you're projecting into the crystal, and at the same time squeeze with a little sharp squeeze with the crystal. Now, a regular crystal does this. It's effective. But when you use a Vogel type crystal, which has the two angles cut like that, Jen Han said, quote, "Natural rock crystals are of course effective, but the Vogel cut, as you name them, are a more surgical tool to operate into the fabric of space-time and universal consciousness, because of that aspect where the two vortices come together and create that wormhole singularity that allows you to go in with your consciousness and actually affect the planetary matrix." So you can imagine if the square root of 1% of the population just did this with their normal thoughts, if there was augmented with crystals to do that, there would be even more of an effect on what Jen Han called the planetary matrix. The planetary matrix, the crystals that grow on this planet are resonant, and all minerals that grow on this planet are resonant with this planetary matrix, as well as as they call it, our envelopes. Our bodies have a DNA of this planet, and so we're resonant. If we were to get a crystal on Mars or be a Martian, we couldn't affect the planet Terra as well, because there's not that resonance. So we have this ability to affect our planetary matrix. Did that answer your question, Michael? That I went off on a tangent on that.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice if people get a better idea on exactly how crystals can act as some kind of dimensional or density doorway or portal, because I think both of you talked about that. And Elena, maybe you can clarify, firstly, what's the difference between a density and a dimension, and how do crystals act as a bridge between, is it densities or dimensions or both? Yeah, can you clarify that?
Yes, Michael. So a dimension is a parallel universe. And each dimension has a scale of different densities. And this is a scale of density of matter. That means that each density has a proper rate of frequency, a speed of vibration between the atoms of any matter. So each density will vibrate at a faster or slower rate. That's densities. A life form that is incarnated into higher density will be invisible to people living in a lower density because the rate vibrates faster, but they will all be living in the same dimension. That means they will be on the same plane, like living together. For instance, that's all the stories of the legend about the fairies and, the people living in a parallel world, which is a faster density, faster rate of matter. So that's densities. Now, in a ship, for instance, I take the example of the Intergalactic Confederation. They come with ships, and in the ships there are different cultures from different densities. So for everyone to see each other and be on the same level of physicality, they can do that with crystals. Crystals will be bridges, as they say. So how does it work? The vortex in the center, when it is activated by a certain pulse, it bridges. It connects anything that connects to the vortex. For instance, now I take the example of the experiment we did with Dan. We activated first the vortex of the crystal. I have one here by pressure. So you can do it by pressure, by pulsing in the same time, breath in it, pressure in at the, where the vortex is. There's a better way of doing it. It's sending electrical pulses. So Danaan told us about a 20 hertz frequency, which is that works the best. So you activate first, you stimulate the vortex. I mean, you open the vortex of the crystal. It's open, it's ready to bridge. It's going to bridge whatever you send to the vortex with the existing planetary matrix or universal matrix where the crystal is. So what you're going to send to bridge to the existent matrix, you send a thought, for instance. So we send a thought, we send an electrical impulse, which was bridged by the breath. The breath connected our consciousness to the crystal. So activating the vortex, interface with the crystal, create the link by breath, the surgical breath that Dan just showed. What is that exactly? Breath carries consciousness. And as a shaman, I use that in shamanism. When we do soul retrieval, I've done soul retrievals. I went to bring back pieces of scattered soul to a person. And when I came back from my journey, I breathed in his chakras, the pieces of consciousness to retrieve the soul complete. That's what you do by the breath. The breath carries consciousness. So you are going, once the vortex is activated, stimulated, you breathe in your consciousness. That means you bridge to your consciousness, bridges to the crystal, because the vortex is open, and by the breath, you bridge your consciousness to the crystal. You have interfaced. Now you send a thought. Yes.
No, finish what you were going to say.
Then you send a thought, which is an electrical impulse into it, because you are bridged, and the electrical impulse is going to be imprinted to alter, to impact the existing grid of reality.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for that explanation, because it reminds me of what I remember Ralph Ring talking about when Otis Carr developed the first civilian spacecraft. It was flight tested in 1960, and he described the first, Ralph Ring, he described being part of a team. He said that there were three people that tested this flying saucer craft that Otis Carr had built based on Nikola Tesla's information. And Ralph Ring said that in the center of this craft was a crystal, a very large multifaceted crystal. And he said that they had to interface their consciousness. So there were three. It was Ralph Ring, Ralph Ring, Major Aho, and there was a third person, I don't remember. And they were in this prototype spacecraft, and they interfaced their consciousness with this multifaceted crystal, and they literally teleported to another location in California, spent some time there, and then teleported back. But it was this process of a group of people achieving some kind of coherence with their consciousness, focusing on their destination and interfacing with the crystal. And then they were instantly teleported there and then came back. And there was a space-time anomaly, because Ralph Ring, when he was describing this, he said that they thought it didn't succeed. They thought it didn't work because, it was, to them, it appeared it was just an instant of time. But in fact, they were gone for like half an hour. So either of you, Dan, you probably know of Otis Carr's.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Ralph Ring's and the crystal. It's interesting because Danaan says when you can connect into that, you can go in space-time densities anywhere into the matrix when you do that. To answer your question, Michael, about how why the crystal has this ability to go through multiple densities, let me do just a quick graphic here. That might, it's always helpful with graphics. You know, as my experience, by the way, Marcel Vogel, I found out just this last year that in 1977, he was having a Kundalini experience on a sacred mountaintop in India at the same time, which is kind of odd and coincidental. Anyway, the different solids that all interface into each other, they go into infinity. And as this is a Metatron's cube, how all of them fit into each other. 64 tetrahedral grid, Nassim Haramein came up with that, and you can see it projects into the tree of life. And this matrix that is tetrahedral, this geometry is in our planet Earth and the sun. All the planets have this 19.47 degree points of a star tetrahedron within its structure, and the Russians discovered the isosahedron and dodecahedron grids on it as well. So you have this geometry structure in the spherical bodies in our system. Even the planetary orbits have this geometry. And Nassim also discovered on the Schwarzschild proton that there's this fractal geometry that goes from a proton to a galaxy to the whole universe that's on this fractal scale that goes into infinity. And that they discovered that the periodic table of elements is also based on this tetrahedral geometry, and our DNA and the amino acids. And so you have all these different aspects, as well as in water, because it's universally resonant. And when they dug ice core samples in Antarctica, they found that all the 7 major classes of geometry are formed in water, showing that it is universally resonant, as well as quartz. And you have this 52-degree angle with quartz, which is like the Great Pyramid, and the molecular bonding angles of water is harmonics of that, and we'll go into all that. Professor Victor Schauberger, rather, when he developed this hyperbolic curve, which represents the curvature of space-time. Interesting, when you take the 51.84 degree angle and you cut a slice of it, it gives you a golden mean ratio egg, which shows the relationship of the golden mean ratio to this 52-degree angle. And so anyway, what I was bringing all this up for was that to show that there is this tetrahedral fractal geometry, which is like the building blocks of the entire universe. Worlds are created on it. It's the secret of the universe. And that being as such, and quartz being of a tetrahedral hexagonal nature, water being of a tetrahedral hexagonal nature, has this ability to resonate, just like the Russians did experiments with quartz where all the frequencies of light in the higher spectrum can go through quartz, but they can't go through glass because it's an amorphous. The molecules are, just fused together and it's clear, but it's not the same as the molecular structure of quartz, which allows all the frequencies of light. And just like water allows all the geometries of nature to form. And so when you have this universal resonant ability, it has this ability to be resonant on multiple densities at the same time, like the arc that Elena, experienced, that the craft can be physical on multiple densities.
So if the universe is this holographic fractal geometry and a quartz crystal reflects that, then by us being able to tune into the quartz, we can then bridge these densities and travel back and forth in densities, and Elena, you mentioned dimensions as well. Does it apply across dimensions? I mean, can a quartz crystal be used in this way that both of you and Dan have been describing, to actually move from one dimension to another?
After what Danaan said, yes, it can.
Mm-hmm. That's what he said.
Fascinating.
Anything's
Okay, well-
possible, he said. Anything.
Okay.
Bridge across time and space, densities, dimensions.
Mhm.
He said this is great power, that he's extremely honored to be able to share this information with us. So we've been given a gift from these beings.
Well, I know you, Dan, are very familiar with the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto and how water can be influenced by thoughts and emotions, and even just writing just the word love on a piece of paper and putting some water near that can influence the geometry of the water. So why is it that when there are positive vibration or positive thoughts or feelings generated at water, it arranges itself in some kind of hexagonal geometry, which is reflective of crystals? So how does that work?
I love you asking this question because it's a good one. Yeah, Dr. Emoto's work, as he flash froze water at the moment of whatever's going on in an environment. Somebody could be feeling gratitude, love, happiness, joy, or they could be feeling hatred and jealousy, or, you know, the other negative things, you know. When he captured the water, only the ones of love and gratitude and things like that form the hexagonal patterns. And why is that? Danaan described it perfectly. He says, quote, "Dissonance cannot attune to an ordered state of geometrical resonance." In other words, the natural state of the universe is love. When fear and hate, anger and everything are a dissonant energy to the normal fundamental core program of the universe, which is love. And that's why crystals and water and love, they all resonate, because they're all part of this core fractal geometry which the universe is based upon. And so what Dr. Emoto was doing, he was capturing dissonant energies not being able to form into the matrix, because the matrix is in water. It has its hexagonal form. And so that's the answer to your question, Michael.
So this is a very important insight here, that dissonant energies can't influence something that is structured. Like structured water will not be influenced by discordant water. But the other way, it works the other way, that discordant water or unstructured water will be influenced by water that is coherent or structured, pervaded by this love energy. So that's a very profound insight, because what it tells us is that a person, an individual who has mastered this love frequency, like a master, like Jesus, right? I think Jesus of Nazareth, I mean, he is someone that and this is something I got from the Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. She described how Jesus, just from a very early age, believed in nothing else but love. Just totally, that's what he was all about. He was just about love. And wherever he went, after a little while, the priests would hate him and would try to drive him out, whether it was to Egypt or whether it was to India or to Tibet. And eventually it was to, of course, Palestine, that he exuded this love energy. And of course, people around him just loved it and worked with him, but the powers that be just couldn't stand it, that they tried to drive him out. So yeah, this is very profound, that someone that is steeped or anchored in this love energy, that their body resonates that, and people are either going to get into alignment with it and love him, or just like they're going to freak out and like, we got to get rid of this guy.
This is an important point, Michael. The work Elena and I are doing with the putting a positive vision, for the timeline on Terra, it can't be effective unless there is love with it, love for all beings. And that's why Jen Han said it's important to do this work, to be in, and I'm working on it, on being gamma brainwaves, because the gamma brainwaves, when you're in gamma brainwaves, you have this love for all beings, is one of the aspects of being in gamma. And he said, Jen Han said that when you're in gamma, it opens up vortices in the mind where anything is possible. And so in order for you have a vision, you're planting it into the crystal and you're sending it into the planetary matrix. If there's not love behind it, love is the carrier that, like Jen Han said, it's like a secure channel where it doesn't allow dissonance to occur. And it has this transcending ability where it transcends into the higher dimensions. And it's in the higher dimensions, I meant densities too. At the higher densities are connected to all the lower densities. And so it has a greater effect on affecting all reality.
Elena, do you want to kind of like elaborate on that the power of love, if you like, or that someone who's in alignment with this underlying holographic fractal geometry of crystals is someone that's going to have this tremendous impact on people around him or her?
Yes, love is a state of organized matter. It's a stable order of things. It's how the universe is structured. The entities and the people, not to name them, who are trying to stop humanity of Earth to access the full potential of their psychic abilities, is creating dissonance by discord, dissent among people, divisions, for us not to vibrate in this higher rate of frequency that is love. Because when we vibrate into love, what does it mean, vibrating into love? It's finding, stopping the fears to reach out to us, finding the happy place within. For meditation, that's very easy. With practice, it's really everyone can do it. Find your happy place, your place of peace, and then love the whole world, love everyone, spread this love, and you become to vibrate into this frequency. And then when you are like this, you have the psychic power to influence reality. If you're really doing that well, you can even do telekinesis or things like that, because then the portal of all capabilities is open within us. We are activated. We are who we are. So that's something that's interesting. Also, when I am teleported onto Thoran ship, I always need to be in a state of peace and calm. If I am angry or upset, it will work, but it will be difficult for me. I'll be sick. So that's something I want to mention as well.
Well, Dan, I have a question for you based on Marcel Vogel's examination of Dr. Ray Brown's crystal, that there was this Atlantean crystal that was retrieved from the Bermuda Triangle, and that he examined it. So what did he find with this Atlantean crystal?
Oh, yeah.
Well done.
This is a great one. I sure do a little share screen here. Dr. Ray Brown, he was treasure hunting, actually, and there was a big storm and the sands pulled away, and it was a pyramid revealed down the Bermuda Triangle, and he swam into this pyramid, and there was this room that had 7 chairs, and one was taller than the other, almost like he was the leader of the group. And from the ceiling of this pyramid, there was a golden rod with a ruby tip crystal, and in the pedestal was this crystal sphere. I actually took this photo of it. What it seems pretty apparent that these beings weren't just playing poker. You know, they were working with their consciousness and with this sphere to possibly affect the actual fabric of reality connected into there appeared to be a connection to this huge pyramidal structure that they were in. It's one of a couple of things that were interesting that I recommend everybody going to Elena Danaan's YouTube channel and look back at our March show. We went into a little history of the ancient use of quartz crystals in different situations. Another fascinating situation was Marcel worked with the Michael Hedges crystal skull. And
that's enough. Before we go there,
okay.
Before we go there, I just wanted to kind of like cover this idea that with this Atlantean crystal, you had a group of people forming a circle around it and focusing their intent, and that interfacing with that crystal, they would achieve their intent. Now,
we would assume
exactly
that,
what is
yes.
that? You want to elaborate? And Elena too, because that to me is like, well, you know, this is where the boundaries between science and magic kind of like get blurred. So you want to elaborate on that, both of you?
Well, it's a lost science of understanding of the geometry of the matrix, and these beings in Atlantis or whatever it was, they apparently understood the mechanisms of these sciences and how it interfaces with consciousness. And it appears, you know, we can only speculate that these chairs in a circle were beings that were using their mind that was interfaced. And what Dr. Ray Brown noticed was it was like blackened. It was like intense energy or something happened. And this crystal sphere, about the size of a tennis ball, had an interesting structure that was inside the sphere that looked like a little pyramidal structure, was like a grid work. Anyway, there's a whole story behind that.
So Elena, again, that that image of this Atlantean crystal with the chairs around it and people using it by focusing their consciousness. Anything you want to share about that?
Yes, Michael. Well, the chairs, it's a very important, crucial element. I have many reasons to believe that there were several pyramids in Atlantis using different crystal technologies. This one with chairs wasn't a generator of energy as others were, but it was something to travel or remote view by projection of consciousness using this crystal. Why do I believe it was that? Because the chairs, I found these chairs into two things. Reading the books of Radu Cinema, he mentions these kind of chairs where you can bridge your consciousness to somewhere else. That was interesting. It was matching my experience, my personal experience, using pilot chairs in spaceships. I've been using trying these chairs a few times, where in fact there are different commands in it. These chairs are the pilots. You need to interface with the chair. You interface your consciousness with the chair, and then once you're interfaced, your mind will drive the ship. How does it work? You connect physically. I can only explain the spaceship once because that's the only one I've experienced. You interface, you place your skin on two pads, hexagonal pads at the front of the chair. The ones in the ships, Pleiadian ship I've experienced, it's a green crystal, kind of hexagonal pads, and that interface your DNA. It reads your DNA, it interfaces it. If it's a good match, if it's a match, it interfaces with the artificial intelligence of the ship. So you need to have the right DNA, matching DNA to do that. Once you interface, your consciousness is going to interface with the consciousness of the ship. And then your thought drive you wherever you want to go, not only in space, but you can teleport to other place, translocate. I suppose you can travel in time, but I haven't experienced it. So that reminds me the chairs that Dan just described from the pyramid in Atlantis that were found. Why not? Why wouldn't it be projecting the consciousness of the people sat in the chairs to a place somewhere, or maybe do some grid work? I don't know. That's my commentary.
Well, thank you. Well, Dan, maybe you can kind of walk us through now the crystal skulls, because I thought that was truly fascinating what you and Elena had discussed about the crystal skulls being a way of transferring consciousness from one body to another. I mean, that's amazing stuff. So, yeah, tell us about them.
Speaking of transferring consciousness, you're thinking about form resonance. Form has resonance. The skull has resonance with our skulls. Michael Hedges' skull was found in British Honduras. A young girl found it on an altar in an ancient temple. And Marcel was able to work with this skull, and it had incredible, the skull would cloud up and even make singing noises. It was very unusual. He went into the skull and asked, what is the purpose and function of this? And this is what he saw. This is it's incredible. If you cut against the grain, which this was, it will fracture. I mean, this is an incredible piece of artwork, if anything else. The technology in order to form the skull. He saw a temple with a hole in the top. The skull sat on a pedestal directly under the hole. There was a priest robed in white, wearing a medallion of gold inscribed with an image of the sun and its rays. The priest waited for the light of the sun to strike the skull, illuminating it. An older person with a shaved head came into the temple. The priest put his left hand, you have to think of left hand as receiving and right hand as transmitting, right? Left hand on the skull of the elderly man and his right hand on the skull. He then drew in his breath and pulsed his breath, like that. The information of the mind of the older man was now transferred into the skull. He left, and in his place, a young girl, also dressed in white. The priest reversed his hands, placing his left hand on the skull, in other words, receiving from the skull, and his right hand on the head of the young girl, drew in his breath, pulsed his breath, and that knowledge that was contained in the skull was now transferred into the young person, is what he saw. And that was what Marcel got. And it makes sense, because when you think about quartz being universally resonant, and that, as Jenhan said, quartz has way more capabilities, and he talks about being used in the med beds, that their ability to store is not only, Stanford Research Institute did a experiment with it. They were able to put the image of the Mona Lisa in a crystal, very, very primitive and crude, but you can imagine that, with these med beds and things, they can even, temporally store patterns of a very complex holographic matrix, because quartz it's like a perfect medium that all things within the matrix can resonate with, and it can store into.
So, Elena, do you know anything about crystal skulls? I always tried to work out what crystal skulls' specific function was, because they're not geometrical; they just represent a skull, or shaped to look like a skull. So, is there real purpose somehow to enable this? One of their purposes is to enable this kind of transfer of consciousness from one human to another.
I know that there is no archaeological evidence that explains what they were for. So archaeology cannot give an answer to that. Now, regarding the information Dan and myself received from Danaan, knowing that everything is geometrical equation, that consciousness can interface only with a matching geometrical shape. For instance, a human body. A human body is a certain ratio. A human consciousness cannot incarnate in a dog because it won't match the geometrical pattern, the resonance. It incarnates into a human body, a human consciousness. So coming from that, why are the crystal sculpted skulls, why are they not just crystals, just a quartz? No, they are sculpted very with a lot of effort, I suppose, or not, we don't know, into a human skull. Maybe I can suggest that it is to embed a human consciousness in it. A human consciousness cannot be probably stored in a normal quartz, but maybe it can be stored. A soul can maybe be stored in a crystal skull. I believe that it could work. So my interpretation would be, why not? It would be something to store human consciousness.
Yeah, form has resonance.
Yeah.
I know you worked for nearly 20 years as an archaeologist, Elena, and you spent a lot of that time in Egypt, and you got to see some of the crystal technologies that the ancient Egyptians used. So did you ever come across anything like this in your archaeology research, that the Egyptians were using crystals to do any of these things that we've been talking about?
Well, there's crystals were used, interestingly, into a statuary of the funeral rites. For instance, someone passed away. There was a statue that was made of this person, and the statue was placed into the antechamber of the tomb. And this statue was supposed to communicate, to make the bridge between the deceased person and the living family. The living family would come visit the statue, and they would talk to the deceased person. These statues, these funeral statues, only the funeral statues, had quartz eyes. The eyes were conical, so you had sculpted eyes in, usually it was ivory or white stone, and inside the pupil would be a quartz crystal with a conical shape sculpted in it that would give the illusion of, the iris. Why quartz? They could have gone through less trouble with glass. No, quartz. And here we see the quartz as a transponder, as a bridge between the living and the dead, or the afterlife. Well, I find that just joins the purpose of what we're talking about.
Well, Dan, you mentioned a med bed, and I think this is something that maybe. Oh, sorry, Elena, you wanted to say something about this?
I'm just showing what Elena was describing. This is graphics that Elena put together on the eyes being filled with quartz crystals.
That is fascinating. So, yeah, I guess there's questions we can ask about that, but I wanted to get onto the med beds because that's such a hot topic
Yes.
today. Everyone wants to know about med beds, and in my kind of review of what different people are saying so far, I can think of 3 different types of med beds in terms of the technologies that are used in them. Actually 4. If you there are 4 types. One is the use of pharmaceutical products that a person gets into a med bed and they're suspended there for a couple of weeks. So there are secret space program insiders have said that they've kind of had their age regressed by just being held static in some kind of bed-like chamber for weeks and pumped with pharmaceutical products, and their age regressed. Then there's another type of med bed would be one that uses electromagnetic frequencies, where people would be healed through electromagnetic frequencies and holograms. Another is the kind of like some of the secret space program people have talked about black goo or green goo nanites that are used in these med beds. So that doesn't seem to be a very positive type. And then finally, there's this med bed using fractal holographic patterns with crystals, which to me sounds like the kind of most positive form of med bed out there. So Dan, maybe you can address that, and Elena, if you want to add anything after Dan.
You just had an interview with Jean-Charles, who his body was almost cut in half by a black Draco, and they put him in a med bed with crystals in it, and it reformed him completely. So I've just talked briefly on this, but the holographic technology that, as Alex Collier described, that how they're able to holographically tune through time. This is how the 20 and back are able to age regress people, because they're able to tune through the holographic nature of reality that can go back through time. In one of the, I'll just cover this real briefly. One of the projects I worked on was this camera that was built in the 1950s that could take photographs and create these holograms in space. And then the hologram, this was patented in Paris, France, the European Patent Office, and thousands of photos were made. So the technology was real, but it substantiated what Alex was saying, is that in the holographic field, you can tune through time, because this camera, I've worked on a number of different radionic equipment, but this one was able to tune backwards and forwards into time and take a photograph of that. And so it substantiated what Alex Collier was saying about the Andromedas, revealed to him how in fact, they call the med beds a camera, because it takes a image of your holographic pattern, and it goes all the way back to the moment of your conception. And so they're able to tune through this through time.
Elena, do you want to elaborate a little on med beds that are using crystals and holographic healing patterns?
Yes, so what I have been explained by Danaan, it's that, of course, everything has a holographic structure. Now, something that needs to be precise, hologram is not, that doesn't mean illusion or fake, hologram is a structure, and a structure of light, actually. And so all our bodies are structured with a holographic pattern. Okay, when we have a wound, the holographic structure is dissonant, disorganized in a chaotic way. The link between the particles are broken or distorted. Okay, that's a wound. That's, you know, what a crystal will do in a medbed, crystal technology. The crystal technology will bridge an ordered state of matter into the disordered, chaotic state of matter. What does it mean? Is that, as Danaan said, the universe, I quote him, the universe tends to perfection.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a dissonance somewhere, you bring a resonant, ordered, same pattern into it. The altered pattern will morph into, reorganize automatically. It's a natural law into the organized state of matter. That's how it works. So you manage to get the healthy version template of, for instance, you have a destroyed arm, like MASH, you know, you manage by technology to get the template of a healthy, perfect arm of using your body, probably regressing in time to a moment where your arm was good. And so this organized pattern of your arm will be stored into the crystal, and the crystal will be imprinting the healthy pattern of your arm into the disorganized pattern of the actual wounded arm. And the wounded structure, the chaotic structure, will, nothing needs to be done. It's instantly, well, it will quickly rearrange to match the organized, natural, original one, because Danaan said the universe tends to perfection. It's a natural law. You put something organized beside a disorganized, the disorganized will organize to match the organized one. That's it.
I love that statement. The universe tends toward perfection, and that at the core, love is the fundamental structural fabric of the universe. You know, it gives you great hope for the future.
So as we are kind of moving into this future, I mean, there are going to be different healing modalities coming forward. So we've heard about the crystal holographic healing based on this kind of fractal connection between crystals, water, love, and that's universal. But there are also other forms of healing. And I know, Dan, you've probably come across the work of Robert Becker, the Piezoelectric. And of course, that is based on some of the work of Nikola Tesla, who understood that very specific electromagnetic frequencies can also stimulate healing. So are we talking about something completely different, or is there a connection between this kind of crystal holographic healing and the kind of electromagnetic healing that people like Robert Becker and Nikola Tesla talked about?
Oh, Dr. Robert Becker, he did some great work. Yeah, I love what he did with the salamander. He was fascinated how the salamander, you chop his arm off, it grew back. You know, he did that with a frog, and they didn't grow back. And he measured the electrical energy in the salamander was much higher. But what he did was he increased the electrical energy in a frog, and the frog grew its arm back. So showing that the electrical potential, and the electrical potential in our body is brought up through breath. As you breathe and do deep breathing, it builds up the electrical potential in your body. When working with Marcel with healing, when he first time he cut this as a gift for me, and I was going back on the plane to San Diego, there was a football player sitting next to my And he just had surgery on his knee. He was in incredible pain. I said, look, I'm not a doctor. I'm kind of an experimental scientist. Like, we can try some unusual procedures, which had to do with, I basically facilitated him healing himself using the breath. We were able to go in through the different densities and pull out the discordant pattern. And when we got off the plane, he pointed at me and to his parents. He said, like, "Guy, he fixed my leg." That was my first experience of using the crystal, which similarly he trained about 24 medical doctors with the same principle, in that our body has multiple densities to it, and that energetic patterns can be pulled out with a crystal and breath, because the breath, as Elena was describing, is connected to a multi-dimensional transfer of information. When we inhale and exhale, it's more than just, giving oxygen, the hemoglobin in our blood. It's it's a transfer of information every time we inhale and exhale. And we pulse our breath, there's like a spike that can pierce through the holographic reality when we use our intention like that. We're all very powerful, but they've kept this knowledge from the people of Earth, because if everybody became aware of how much power they have within us, we'd be able to clean house really quick.
Well, I think this is a very interesting kind of issue to explore, is how kind of crystal healing technologies and electromagnetic healing technologies, how they kind of like align themselves, because I know there is something, a science called dosimetry, where you can identify a specific electro or frequency of different organs. And of course, that can be used for both healing people or as a weapon. And Nick Begich wrote a book, I think he called it Mind Control, and he talked about how the US Army and the military had identified specific frequencies of the human body, and rather than, of course, releasing this in technology that would help heal people, they were keeping it secret. They were classifying it and weaponizing it. So that's using electromagnetic frequencies. So is holographic crystal healing something that is really exclusively healing only, or is it something that maybe the powers that be are wanting to weaponize it?
Anything can be used for, like with radionics, you can use it to heal, or you could, like in voodoo, you get somebody's hair and you start putting pins into it. But there's more complex than that. The real power is in love, because, like Danaan said, dissonance cannot resonate with the matrix that we're in. It loses it, because it doesn't have the integrity, because love is like a complex holographic formula that is the fundamental basis of the whole reality. So if you're not in alignment with that, you don't have the power to affect reality in the same way. So, Elena and I are doing some amazing work with the information that Danaan has shared with us, that we're kind of between, because everybody doesn't have a specially cut crystal and signal generators and special electrodes. We're both doing an experiment, you could say, in opening up the wormhole within the crystal in order to imprint into the holographic matrix. I can share that with you briefly. We have all the equipment set up. We've got it all ready to activate, but I've been waiting for Elena to get the last components, and so we're both going to do it at the same time. But this has been a long communication dialogue where Danaan has given very specific instructions, and I can share with you here. singularity point that happens within the crystal, it's like a Merkaba. It's like you have these two rotations, one's going clockwise, the other one going clockwise, and it forms this wormhole within the crystal. And it's activated through the piezoelectric stimulation of it. It's similar, it's all throughout the universe, this star tetrahedral structure. And so this is where we apply pressure. If you're just using a Vogel crystal, this is where you squeeze and apply pressure if you don't have the technology. But we're applying electronic pulses to this area, which is the phase conjunction node. It talks about magnetic erasers, Schumann resonance. Okay. Elena and I have these specially cut crystals to Jenhan's specification, where this is not a normal Vogel crystal. This is cut exactly in alignment with the lattice structure of the crystal, along with the 52-degree transponder angle and the 60-degree sender angle of a 6-sided crystal. The highest conductivity metal, Jenhan said, the crystal reacts with close to pure conductivity metals. They ring the lattice. And so we're using silver, which is, as you can see, is the highest conductivity. This is my setup. Elena has a different setup, very cleverly with a candle holder. It's hexagonal. We were both trying to figure out how to make this so that the 60-degree angle is pointing up, and that these are like 1-ounce silver coins that are polished down to be flat against the surface, and they're being fed into with a signal generator that's sending in a very sharp pulse into the vortex center of the crystal. We both ordered our signal generators, and this is what the pulses look like going into it. And so we haven't switched it on yet. But one thing that what Jenhan said is kind of interesting. He says there is a saturation point. If we stimulate it past the saturation point, the crystal will start to sing. Makes this singing noise. And he says, quote, "There's a saturation point. After this point is passed, the crystal implodes. It becomes light and transcends matter and density. It can be very harmful at this stage. So this is why we harvest the frill and generate energy supply by sequences. In other words, they don't allow it to go up to the saturation point. They kind of cut it off and then build it up again and cut it off. And they do it in sequences as they generate energy. And a new set of questions I'm wanting to find out, because the frill is like the universal life force of the universe, and how we may be able to use this for healing and for regeneration of our Terran Earth bodies that last on average less than 80 years. How we can maybe before the med-beds get released, how we might be able to use some of this crystal technology in regenerating ourselves. So Elena and I haven't switched it on. We're about to do that maybe this week sometime. And we're going to give each other feedback of, we both have to go into our high gamma state of consciousness, and then we'll feel the wormhole vortex as it opens up, and with our consciousness go into it. And we'll let you know what happens.
Well, I know you talked about a positive timeline in the future using crystals and their holographic nature. And also you talked about how crystals are resonating with the planet's matrix.
Yes. So,
and also our bodies resonate with the planet's matrix. So how does that work then? If you or a group of people want to manifest a positive timeline using crystals, how would you do that? Maybe Elena first, and then Dan?
Well, you have first to do a preparation that everyone tunes in with the same imprint, the same thought, that we all send the same thought. For instance, in the video we made with Dan, we suggest a very quick visualization meditation of a certain future, positive future. And people were all imagining, manifesting in their thought the same future, same pictures, more or less, but it was the same intent. And then that's a preparation necessary. And then everyone tuned in the same time, doing individual connection with their own crystal. And everyone's crystal, if the interface is well done, will interface their thoughts, personal thoughts, with the planetary matrix to which the crystal is linked. So that's how it works.
Dan?
Yeah, Jenhan described that the planetary matrix, all beings are interconnected with it. When you go into how we're doing it with a crystal, it goes into the core of the planetary matrix, and all points are connected, and so it's incredibly powerful. And I'm sure this is like, we've been given an incredible gift from our Pleiadian friends that have told us something that Marcel had no idea that is existing in the vision that he received in a dream that just happens to be the same geometrical angles that they use for their crystals for different purposes, from everything from generating energy to you name it. They have a lot of different functions that they use, as you know well, in the secret space programs. So yeah, you can go to Washington to testify under oath. You can try to put together a militia with weapons and stuff, or you can protest with pickets, and they'll circumvent that with provocateurs and false flag things, and the media will spin it. And so everybody's wondering, how can we do something really effective that's using love, that's using consciousness to affect the transition of because everybody knows that this doesn't have to be this way on this planet, that we can have a beautiful paradise on this planet that's more in alignment with love, and that we can release these incredible technologies. All these criminals doing crimes against humanity can be taken out of operation, and a beautiful world that opens up to exchanges with other cultures off planet. And so Elena and I, we thought, wow, this is empowering knowledge to give to people to be able to make an effect, make a change. And it's based on science, and it's based on the science of not only an earth scientist, but of beings that are many thousands of years in advance of us are confirming this knowledge. And so it's very powerful.
Well, I found one of in Elena's upcoming book, The Seeders, that she sent me, or Elena, you sent me that chapter on Enki, you meeting Enki, and in that you had this dialogue where he told you about how the original Adamic DNA code had been preserved, and despite many thousands of years of manipulation and trying to dumb humans down, that Adamic DNA, that potential is still within us. And Enki, or Prince Ea, told you that medical technology had been shared with the Earth Alliance, and this was about to be released. So how does that relate to what we've been talking about?
DNA is a frequency, emits a certain frequency. Okay, when so certain DNA pattern is going to emit a certain frequency. When you alter this pattern, this DNA, this genome by genetic manipulation, alteration, as we have been victim throughout the ages by nefarious organizations and beings, the frequency of the DNA is going to change. It will be the same genome, but altered. So how you will have lost the ancient original frequency. It's not resonating anymore. It's a different frequency that's lost in time. So that's what Enki, or Prince Lear, as he likes to be called, is bringing back the original frequency key when the original pattern of the Adamic, as we can call it, DNA was unaltered. So the Intergalactic Confederation could have done that, because I've asked, why are you? Because the Intergalactic Confederation, the Seeders, they have the DNA templates of everything. And he said, because that's a universal law. He said, my people did it. So it needs to be my people who repairs it. You know, because, well, that's a whole story. Enlil faction who altered and wanted to enslave humanity, you know, that's another story. So it's the same people who needs to finish the circle. That's universal. You repair what you have altered. That's something Jane Hans said about repairing. It said that about the med beds. When you bring the original unaltered pure pattern into the altered pattern, and the you know what we explained about the med bed, it's called repairing. And repairing, I visualize this in two words: repairing, pairing back. You know, that was very interesting.
So I know that DNA and human blood is, I mean, that is carried in the blood, and I mean carried by the whole body. But you know, we've been talking about crystals, the connection with water, the ability of water to like transmit love and organize itself in this kind of holographic fractal reflection of the universe. So does that mean that this kind of like DNA alteration, that when we come in alignment with this kind of original pattern, that this is something that's going to be more in alignment with these kinds of crystal healing technologies, or not?
Yes, I mean, when this frequency key of the original unaltered DNA, Adamic DNA, is, because it is implemented, put into the medbeds technology now, as we speak, when you lie down in one of these medbeds, you receive the crystals that are contained in the medbed in this technology are going to transpond into, you know, this original template onto you, and the universe tends towards perfection, quotes Danaan. You know, that's going to work like this.
Yeah, the medbed you were in, Elena, had water in it, which is interesting, which is universally resonant when you were in France. Yes.
Yes, I had the opportunity to try a medbed 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was an experimental medbed. The private clinic has disappeared. Anyway, it's the whole story. But I was laid down on a transparent table in this ovoid machine, and underneath there was water. I was laying on water, and there were small, tiny cannons, or you know, they were shooting frequencies, sound frequencies, at my body in precise places where I needed to be healed. And there was a tumor that was disintegrated. It wasn't there after that. Just not even an hour.
Well, you know, just to kind of like finish up, you know, one of the things, if you look around us, if you look around at the moment, you know, our world is totally divided and discordant, and there's a lot of chaos. But yet in the midst of all of this, I mean, there's a lot of these profound breakthroughs and healing modalities that are emerging. And of course, that to me, this kind of brings us back to that point we discussed earlier with Masaru Emoto, where you have like structured water and unstructured water, that structured water can influence the entire, like one drop of structured water can influence an entire lake of unstructured or discordant water. So is this what's we are going to be witnessing now, that even though now, in a way, you look around the planet and one can lose hope, you can get lost in kind of pessimism about how bad it is. But if enough of us attain this kind of alignment with the planetary matrix, the grid, whether it's restoring the Adamic DNA, whether it's going through some kind of medbed using crystal technology, that if enough of us do that, even though we might be relatively few, that square root of 1%, we actually will bring the entire discordant planet into harmony. So maybe Dan, if you want to comment on that, and then Elena.
I do have, an interesting experiment Marcel did was he took the structured water from a sacred spring, had a high energetic signature, put it into a vat of unstructured water. The whole vat had that whole energetic. You could take any drop out of that vat and have that same energetic structure. But you couldn't take an unstructured and put it into a vat of structured water and it wouldn't affect the whole vat. And so human consciousness is kind of like we're in this ocean that love has the greatest power because it's in alignment with the structure of the universe. And so the forces of darkness, they can't tap into that power. And all the challenges that the human race is going through right now is like the growing pains as we move into this Star Trek future, as you say, Michael. And it looks, it's important to be not feed the dark by, dwelling on it. But, as you know, what you don't know can hurt you, as, some people who trust what they see, medical advice on the television, it hurts them, so it's important to be aware, but not to dwell on the dark elements and to, feed the positive timeline reality in your conscious thought, because all of us are creative. We're all fractal of this creative source that we're all from.
Elena, do you want to comment about that? How as humans come into harmony, individuals come into harmony, we can influence the greater reality of discordance and bring that into alignment?
Yes, Michael. Well, as Dan was explaining about Marcel Vogel's experiment with water, and Danaan said dissonance cannot affect resonance at a larger scale. It can maybe try to make a little ripples, but the ripples never settle. The ripples diffuse all the time. The water goes back to the same state of calm. Well, the power of thought, that's what the baddies don't want us to focus on. The power of thought can change reality. It's true. When you take you can do a simple experiment yourself without technology. You take a crystal in your hands, whatever, it's not a Vogel, it's fine, it can be even a raw crystal. It's quartz, it needs to be quartz, because the lattice of quartz is the same, as water and love and etc. It's in harmony with the lattice of the universe. You may be sick, or you feel in a certain, as you feel any day, you take a crystal, you meditate, state of stillness, you just press it at the where you feel the vortex can be. If it's not a Vogel, you will feel it by intuition where it is, and you breathe into it to bind your consciousness into it. And Dan Willis explains it very well in the video we've made. You breathe your consciousness in every side, and then once you interface with the crystal, you visualize yourself healed and perfect, better than you are, even younger if you want, and you manifest the thought that you replace this existing body by the thought, the improved body that you manifest, and you superimpose by transparency, that you convince yourself so much that now you are this improved body. And eyes closed, you pretend that what you see is this new body. Well, actually, you are modifying the holographic structure of your body. By imprinting a more organized and ordered one, which is healthier and younger, if you can manage that. What do you think, Dan? Yeah.
Michael, in our previous show, we were talking about the Nazis infiltrating in and creating a matrix of perception to control education, media, and everything. One of the interesting things I found was that in 1957, Professor Heinz Eisnick of the University of London, there was this huge conspiracy of all these universities and hundreds of respected, they took out of the books anything having to do with the powers of human consciousness to affect reality. And you know, the Nazis were totally into the occult. And so this seems like was part of the matrix of perception. They wanted to keep this knowledge from the public that we have this power within us to affect reality.
Yes, as I just spoke about doing that on yourself, doing on the planet. For instance, visualize your town, for instance, the buildings, visualize more futuristic buildings, maybe more nature, anti-gravity cars passing by. But you need something important. Jenhan said that you need to manifest not like a movie you watch. You manifest in three-dimensional, holographic. You create a new hologram with your mind. That means anything you create, you for instance, you imagine an anti-gravity car, futuristic, passing by. You visualize it, you create it in volume, like from behind, the bottom, you know, every side. That's important. You manifest thought in volume.
So where do people go to learn more about your work, Dan and Marcel Vogel's work on crystals? So where would you recommend they visit, and how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I recommend everyone go to Elena Danaan's YouTube channel and check out that show that we did. Elena did an incredible job on the just over-the-top graphics and everything. On my site, which I just did it in honor and memory of Marcel Vogel, marcelvogel.org. At the very, very bottom, there's a bunch of links to some of the things that we were sharing. Visualize. You know, I like to visualize Nuremberg trials and all these people doing crimes against humanity and all the corrupt medical pharmaceutical corporations taken out and healing centers brought out across the planet, and the media giving truthful information. You know, just imagine in as complete totality as you can, like Elena was saying, and then imprint that vision of the kind of reality, the kind of world that you want to see into the crystal. And I think we're on our way.
Thank you. And Elena, for you, where do people go to learn more about your work?
Well, as Dan was saying, my YouTube channel, Elena Danaan, I have many free videos about how to meditate, and I actually did another video about imprinting love into the planetary matrix. A lot of advice there, and I would recommend to go to Dan Willis' website, where is the planetary matrix, where he put the transcripts of all the work we do on crystals and more about Marcel Vogel. So
Well, I want to thank you both, Dan and Elena, for being on Exopolitics today and giving us this oversight of the importance of crystals in terms of our planet, how they are used by different extraterrestrial civilizations, and how these are gateways or portals to other densities and even dimensions. Fascinating material, so thank you and aloha.
Oh, absolute pleasure, Michael.
Thank you. Aloha.